Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel where we're going to be chatting YA to speculative fiction romance, everything in between, the path, the journey. This is the bright spot of my month, bright spot of my of my experience now in the world. And so I'm really happy to be chatting with everybody today. If you don't know who I am, my name is Lily and I'm the moderator for this panel and kind of like the real life three-dimensional moving person behind Utopia State of Mind. Next, we're going to have our authors introduce themselves, tell us about their books. Then we're going to jump into questions that I have had ever since I finished all of these fantastic books. And then if anyone has any questions during the panel, you can put them in the live YouTube chat, I guess, and then I will try to get back to them at the end of the panel to answer them. Not for me to answer them, but to have everyone else answer them. So yeah, if we could start with the author intros, and Sango, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sangu, and I'm the author of the cozy romantic fantasies, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and the upcoming A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. Irregular Witches is about a lonely witch who is semi hoodwinked into becoming the nanny for a magical tutor for three witch children, and in doing so finds the family she's never had. And other stuff happens as well. And A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping is about a witch who was once really powerful, and then she resurrected her great aunt from the dead, lost all her magic, and is now somewhat begrudgingly running the inn that she and her great aunt started when she was a lot younger. And she is desperately looking for a way to get her magic back. And then things happen.
Do you want to go next, Megan?
Sure. I'm Megan Bannon. I am the author of The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy and The Undermining of Twyla and Frank, and coming this summer, The Undercutting of Rosie and Adam. And there, I got them all right. I have to think really hard about them. And I'm also the author of 2 YA novels, The Bird and the Blade and Soul Swift. My adult books are kind of like quirky rom-com genre mashups that feel like a classic rom-com meets like the Old West meets weird ass fantasy. And my young adult books are a little more kind of like serious and literary, I guess. And yeah, that's me.
Adrienne?
Hi, I'm Adrienne May, A.M. Strickland. I write young adult fantasy standalones for the most part under A.M. Strickland. I have 3 out now: Beyond the Black Door, In the Ravenous Dark, and Court of the Undying Seasons, with one forthcoming later this year called Lady Dragon. And I also write adult dark romantic fantasy romance romantasy under Adrienne May, and we made that decision because of the subject matter, that mine are not cozy. There, my adult fantasy romance is very dark, and my book just came out at the end of March. It's Exquisite Ruin. It's about a sorceress who wakes up in a maze, remembering nothing except that she's powerful, and with her is a demon companion, an immortal who absolutely hates her for reasons that she can't remember, but the two of them have to work together to make it out of the maze alive. Yep. And there's a sequel next year. So.
Me? Okay. Hi, I'm Jamie Paxton. I am the co-author of Homegrown Magic, which just came out. It's a cozy adult fantasy romance. I wrote it with my dear friend Becca Potos, who is not here because they're doing another event for Homegrown Magic in the world today. And actually, that's our second co-written book. We had a YA contemporary come out last June, I think, called Furious, about a car girl and a bike girl who fall for each other one summer. And then I also write YA fantasy. So last year I had The Absinthe Underground also come out earlier in the year. But yeah, this is my adult debut. I guess the quick summary is childhood friends to lovers, so a plant witch and a sort of disaster heir of a rich family. They find each other again after many, many years, and there's magical greenhouses, and it's has a lot to say about anti-capitalism and community and growing relationships. And I do have to say, Megan, I admire your titles with the under taking and such, because we have home for all of our titles, which some of them are very like book 2 is homeward for a spell, and then the future ones are other home ones, but we are increasingly more convoluted in how we twist this idea of home to fit an actual word that has a meaning. So I'm very much in awe of the undertaking and the underpining.
I love that, because it took a long time to kind of cough up undercutting by the time we got to book 3. So like that brings me comfort. Thank you.
Exactly.
So the first question I have is basically just about the main theme of this panel, which is kind of the journey from YA to speculative fiction romance. What when you had this idea, how did you approach it? Were you kind of like, do you have any apprehensions? And how, maybe how did you approach this process differently? I know that everyone kind of has different starting points for when they first wrote this, when it first went on sub, when it didn't go, like when it, there's a huge journey, obviously, for everyone. So I want to just kind of figure out from you all how the book came to be. Sangu, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I just realized after listening to everybody else that I didn't mention any of my YA in my intro, which, kind of the point of the panel, but here we are. Yeah, so before I wrote sort of cozy adult fantasy, I wrote a YA sci-fi, sort of speculative sci-fi about clones, and then I wrote a YA space opera trilogy inspired by Indian mythology. And both of those books were, I think, like Megan said, like more literary, darker, just sort of grittier. And I think that was probably why when COVID hit, it was the last thing I wanted to keep writing. Like, I love those books. I still love writing that kind of thing. But at the time, I didn't want to immerse myself in anything angsty and dark and gritty because I needed space from that. I needed my own escape from lockdown and, the apocalyptic unknowns and, what's happening next and what's going to happen next year. And is the world ever going to be the same again? And, all these big questions that were just terrifying at the time. So, yeah, so I just pivoted and went completely the other way. And when I started writing it, when I started sort of leaning into my cozy witch era and just kind of pulling this new story together, I was just enjoying it. There was no pressure. There was no sense of what am I going to do with this. And then when it came to the point where it was like, well, I have a proposal now. Maybe I should do something. There was definitely a moment where I thought, it's a big shift. It is. They're completely different markets. I had no idea how it was going to go. It was terrifying, but it was also a much needed thing I needed to do at the time. Yeah.
Megan, do you want to go next?
I feel like I'm just going to say the exact same thing. I mean, I wrote these two kind of epic, sweeping, deeply researched YA fantasies, and especially Soul Swift. That was kind of the book of my heart. And it was 3 years of just really digging deep and writing this big, ambitious book. And and then like, early 2020, especially once COVID hit, there was just this moment of, that's not what I want to do right now. Like I'm always interested in that kind of book and in writing that kind of book. And I'm proud of my young adult books, but like Sangu, I kind of needed something a little lighter, especially once we were all stuck inside all day and wondering about the fate of the world and all of that. So yeah, I just started to have a good time. I just sat down and I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where my career's at. I don't know what the future is. So I'm going to write, and I'm going to write something that just makes me happy. And that's where the weirdness that is the undertaking of Heart and Mercy came from. And I don't think, I think it was pretty evident early on, just with the kind of book that it was, that it wasn't going to be young adults. And that was fine. Like it lends itself to being an adult book. So I don't know. I just write what I feel like writing and let the market figure out what to do from there, I guess.
Adrienne?
Unmute. Yeah, I am a bit. I wrote this book during COVID as well, but I'm quite a bit different in that I went darker. My YA fantasy is pretty dark and sweeping, but standalones, and I've been writing YA for 10 years, and I was just kind of wanting to try something different, especially during lockdown. And I was literally lying in bed after being home by curfew at 9 in Spain, and just thought, what's the most indulgent thing I could write right now? And I want to write exactly what I want to write. And my agent had been asking for maybe an adult project as well. So I was just lying there and I was like, I want to go back to my childhood days of watching Labyrinth, but except I want the adult version. So ironically, during COVID and being trapped in my apartment, I wrote about two characters trapped in a maze. Very dark, trying to get out. But yeah, it was just a breath of fresh air, even though it's rather dark, and exactly what the escapist thing that I wanted to write right then. So,
I mean, I could add to that for sure. I like that some of these books are born out of like joy and, like needing something different. It's weird because my career, like I remember reading so many of your all's other books pre-COVID. My debut, which was a YA contemporary, came out May 2020. So like all of my events were canceled, everything was done. And then 2021, one of my family was under quite a lot of tragedy. And so another book came out, and then Becca and I started co-writing Furious in the midst of that tragedy. And so like, my career has been kind of like impacted by COVID in these weird ways. So I don't even know what it is to like, what did I write to escape versus what was impacting? But Becca and I wrote Furious. I slid into Becca's DMs because Becca's an agent and said, I have to tell you about this before I tell you about Homegrown. That's important. It's important context quickly. So Becca had asked in a manuscript wish list on Twitter, like, hey, if anyone wants to write a book that's like a sort of sapphic or, two racers or something like that kind of thing based on like Fast and the Furious. And one of my children was very sick, and my husband and I had been watching all of the Fast and the Furious movies to kind of help us get through. And I saw Becca doing this, and I didn't know Becca at all. And just as one does at like midnight on Twitter, before Twitter blew up, I just was like, oh, I'll just DM her, no problem. And so I like slid into her DMs. I was like, hey, if you don't get this book as an agent, you want to co-write it with me? And that's how we got to know each other. So we co-wrote that book, and it sold. And then we started playing D&D with a bunch of our like author pals. And I had never played D&D, but my youngest did. And Becca had played for years. And so this book actually, our characters in the D&D game were Margot and Hale. And because we had been in this habit of co-writing, when we started building the characters for the D&D game, we just kind of built these elaborate and ridiculous backstories for these characters as if we were already writing a novel, but that was never the plan. It just kind of was the result of how we worked together. And so then we started playing these characters, and then we just kind of like, oh, let's just write a chapter or two, but this won't be a book. We won't do that. And then we had like 150 pages before we knew it, because it's really fun to co-write together, and we loved that process. And so we kind of made this, and then our agents took it out, and it sold to Del Rey like way faster than we were expecting. And it was all kind of a breathless gallop. And then we're like, oh, we have a contract now for this book that was never supposed to be a book, and we're still playing these characters in game. So I don't know if it was a deliberate choice, I guess, unlike, you know, some of you who are like, I need to write something cozy. We were just kind of like, we love working together, and now we've got this other sort of, these characters fully formed. Let's put them in these situations and see what happens. And so I think Becca and I are both very surprised by where we started and where we've gotten to and where we're going, because we do have, and I don't know if this will work, but we definitely have like a 5-book series arc planned. And so we'll see if that comes together. But I'm still actively working in YA. Like I was telling you all before, you know, I have another book due very soon. And I do find that tricky to kind of balance the different spaces and the different tones, because this one is very cozy and light, and the one I'm working on in YA, actually, Adrian, is about, it's called The Hyacinth Labyrinth. So it is about part of my love. It's a, you know, a sword girl and a fae princess stuck in a lab. Well, not really stuck. They kind of zip through the labyrinth. But I've been thinking a lot about the movie Labyrinth as well. So it's tricky, though, to negotiate, as you all said, the different age groups and market expectations. But all motivated by joy, and just, it's fun.
Yeah, that is actually, of course, the perfect segue for my next question, which is exactly what you're saying, right? I wanted to know when, you know, switching age groups, what kind of challenges and excitements are you excited for? But also, kind of like, if there are some challenges, how did you go about solving them? What were you thinking about going through your mind? Jamie, do you want to start? Because you basically just started the introduction to my question. You basically asked my question for me.
Great. So the challenges of switching markets, you said? Okay, well, this is interesting. I think about this a lot. Okay, so the Absinthe Underground came out in last February. And so I was, for some reason, just decided to make like TikTok my thing. And I was making videos every single day. And I was pitching it as this like sapphic romantasy, and these two, you know, hired by a green fairy to do a heist in Fae. And somehow, because I was tapping into all of those tropes on TikTok, I sort of like got, I think a lot of people thought that maybe that was an adult book, because sometimes I would get like messages like, this isn't spicy enough, or how spicy is it? And, you know, so I do think there's a bit of a blur in between like some of the YA romantasy space and the adult romantasy / cozy fantasy space. So I'm still kind of figuring out how to negotiate that. I mean, definitely, like when I talk about it, I'm like, no, it's not spicy. You know, my way books, no, it's not spicy. They're teenagers. I will not engage with that. But similarly, I've seen people say about this book, like we get notes everywhere from like one chili pepper to 4 chili peppers. This is far too spicy. And so I don't actually know what the market expectations are and how to balance it. Like our editor definitely, you know, we had conversations about chili peppers and about like how to market it to like actually, you know, some of your books were comps for this book and things like that. So I find it challenging as a space to exist in as both an author and as someone who tries to talk about her books, either in the adult or YA spaces. I don't know. I don't know that I have good guiding principles. I'm going to stop there and let you all figure it out.
Adrian, do you want to go next? Because I'm interested as well, because both Jamie and Adrian's books, for context, I guess, I think we mentioned it as well, are debut projects in the adult space. So I'm interested to know if similar kind of if you had similar conversations and like similar thoughts to Jamie and the chili peppers.
Yeah, yeah. I agree that the line can definitely be blurry. Like my main character in Exquisite Ruin is 23, 24, which is like, you know, adult definitely versus YA, but you know, not super far off. But I think that it was really distinct for me because of how spicy Exquisite Ruin is. And I really kind of just dove into that for fun as something different, because yeah, I don't do that in my YA. And they really, both my agent and my editor really wanted to distinguish it from my YA, so I didn't have young adult readers thinking it was a young adult book and picking it up. Hence, Adrienne May, my first and middle name, were used as my pen name. And during writing, it felt quite different, because I am still writing YA. I have a sapphic dragon romance fantasy coming out in August. And I was editing both at the same time in the same summer, like basically trading off. As soon as I would send one off to my editor, I'd get another round of edits for the other. And Lady Dragon was third person, past tense, and YA. And like, even though it's kind of gory, like all of my YA, it's one of the sweeter things I've ever written. It's a really kind of sweet love story. And then I'd go back to Exquisite Ruin, which is first person, present tense, and a really toxic love story. So it kind of broke my brain switching back and forth between them. So yeah, they felt very distinct and different to me, and to my editor and agent as well. But yeah, it was a fun change, but challenging to do both at the same time.
Megan, you want to also, I don't know if you also had conversations about Chili Peppers, but also like, the
yeah.
change of age group as well.
Mine's a 4 Chili Pepper, apparently.
I mean, I will say I was always kind of finishing the first draft of Heart and Mercy. I did send my agent an email that was something like, how much Hoochie Mama is too much Hoochie Mama? Like, I don't know what I should put in here. And I think for me, I should say that my background, I've spent most of my professional career as a children's librarian. And so for like 20 years, I was really steeped in kid lit and YA literature and library services to people under the age of 18. And I used to feel bad if I read books for adults, because part of my job was to just read and read and read and have like a broad background of understanding of what was available for the people I was supposed to serve at the library. So I kind of, as I like finished Soul Swift and I started writing full time, I kind of suddenly had permission to read books for adults for the first time, in decades. I mean, in a really long time. And I got into like Christina Lauren, and I'm like, it was so refreshing. I'm laughing. I'm reading like books for adults, which I, in theory, am. And and it was just, I was like, wow, I was having a really good time. And I thought this reminded me of like reading Bridget Jones's Diary back in the day, like laughing out loud. I love a romantic comedy. And it was like, well, could I do this in fantasy? Like, what does that look like? And if I'm going to write adults, I am so far removed. I mean, I could be the mother of a 23 or 24-year-old, right? And so that's kind of uncomfortable for me too. So in writing adult, it was also like, well, I'm going to write people in their 30s. That's closer to me than people in their 20s. And so I don't know, just kind of snowballed from there. But it was just interesting the process started with giving myself permission to read books for adults for the first time in a long time. And then I think for me, the biggest challenge was like, can I do this? Can I, the children's librarian who has written young adult books, write for adults? Like, do I have the right writing chops for that? And I think there was that made me nervous. And to this day, I'm like, I don't know. I hope I pulled it off. They got published, but it's still an interesting, like, I hope I belong here kind of feeling.
What about you, Sangu? I know that Sangu and Megan both have, a lot of other books in the adult space. And it's interesting, Megan, when you were talking, I was thinking, like, when I first read your first adult, I'm like, did we even use Chili Peppers? Like, right? Because I feel like the conversations have changed from 2020, right?
Yep.
In terms of how we view speculative fiction romance as a whole. So that's why I'm also really interested in kind of the differences between these kinds of time periods.
Yeah, romantasy as a term wasn't a thing when the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches came out. Cozy fantasy wasn't a thing when it sold. It was not a phrase. I mean, obviously we used cozy and fantasy as a descriptor, but like the subgenre cozy fantasy wasn't a thing. And it is wild how much yeah, the market has changed. There was, I don't think I've had any conversations specifically about chili peppers, but I do remember that while I was working on magical innkeeping, and there are, some scenes that have some spice levels, and my editor read them, and she was like, "Can we maybe push the spice a bit more?" And I was like, "Oh, but," because that's, I love reading it. I just can't. I just hate writing it so much. I hate it. I love reading spice in other books. I hate writing it in. I have the secondhand embarrassment as I'm doing it, and but also what's interesting is that much like Megan, I feel like it was my journey in writing has kind of mirrored me growing, because when my first 4 5 books were all YA, and the first one, I think I sold the first one when I was 21, and so I was still barely out of YA. I was pretty much a young adult still, and I think when I had kids, as I started growing older, I feel like my yes, there is a point where it starts to feel like you are older than the age you're writing for, not just obviously physically older, but sort of in your head. And I think when I started writing Irregular Witches, partly because of the COVID thing, but also because I was a lot older then. And it felt like, because I just finished a trilogy, and a trilogy kind of continues a story that's already in place. So this was the first new project I'd written since I'd turned 30. And it suddenly felt like I was a grown up in a way that I didn't feel in my 20s. And what's also funny is that I say that, but I also write middle grade still. So I just went older and younger. And this is not to say I'll never write YA again. I mean, I absolutely will. It's just that I feel like when I started this journey into the adult space, I was that in between of the teenage years wasn't where I felt like I belonged. And I wanted to kind of spread out the other way, both ways. Sort of like kids because I have kids that age, and then I guess an adult because I finally felt like one. Yay.
I will say that's one thing I like about writing adult fiction is like for a long time I've been wanting to engage with more adult themes. Like I'm living motherhood or marriage or aging or just any of the number of these things. And so it's nice to be able to write about that in fiction, even if I'm not explicitly writing about that. So I know exactly what you mean about just moving into like writing adult books as a mirror to yourself. Can I just say something really fast on the chili peppers? So funny that you all say like you get secondhand embarrassment. Becca and I are co-writers. So we end up Discord messaging each other about like logistics of like hot tub scenes and stuff like that. And it's so funny and like so not safe for work kind of thing. And like you learn so much about your friends as you're having these conversations in ways you might never ever like you would never ask, but you've got to figure it out. I will leave it at that and just say that like approaching writing steamy books with another person is a whole other degree of like, okay.
It must be, yes, must be super weird. Yeah. I
Was
can
anyone
barely do
else?
it myself. I don't think I could do it with somebody else.
I know it was so awkward the first time I got edits back because I usually write YA and my editor is like talking about very explicit things in the comments and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Why did I do this? Can I take it back? But yeah, it's very embarrassing. Mm-hmm.
I do remember thinking that when when it was done and when early copies were going out and things, it obviously in the back of my head I had the thought of my parents are going to read this because they've read all of my books. But then fresh hell awaited me because it went from that to my teenager is going to read this. I was like, I don't know which is worse. Yeah, it was a moment of
I just want to remind everyone watching that if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and we can go back to them at the end. I want to talk now about some common themes and some pairings that we have with this panel. And the first one that I want to talk about, kind of what another beautiful segue from Sangu, about parents and about found family, both in the undercutting of Rosie and Adam and A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. I want to know how you both explore parenthood and found family within your books. And I also feel like if all your characters just got together one day, they would have the best time ever. I was reading them. I read both of your books back to back because they're the ones that come out the latest. And I was thinking like they would have so much fun if they randomly just like crossed, into the other world. So yeah, I would love to know about how you both explored those themes in your books. Sangha, do you want to start? Because you were talking about it a little bit before.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I will say that I think because I have in both of my adult books, the sort of the biological parents of a lot of the characters are a bit crap. I would just like to say that does not reflect real life. Yeah, I had great parents, but I think that as a parent, even when you feel like you are doing the best you can, even when you hope very much that you are doing the right thing, there is always that question in the back of your mind. Am I doing enough? Am I doing the right thing? This was right for me, but what if it's not right for my child? And a lot of that comes into play when especially when I wrote Magical Innkeeping, even more than Irregular Witches, I think, because it's about, I mean, the book, I'm trying to figure out a good way to put this that's also not super spoilery. But in short, in Magical Innkeeping, we have a few young characters, but adult characters who've had some fairly shitty parenting in their lives, but also we have a couple of young characters who are currently experiencing not great parenting. And to be clear, it's nothing terrible. It's nothing sort of egregious. It's just they're not great parents. And we have our main characters stepping in to kind of fill that role voluntarily, but not necessarily in terms of I want to be a parent to this child, but just I want to give them something better. And I think that's probably what my ethos on parenting kind of summed up into one sentence is just wanting to give them something better than whatever they have. You always think I could be doing something better. I'd like to be doing better. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the book is about giving the next generation, giving the future something a bit more hopeful than what we've got right now.
Amen. I do think our characters would get along great because every time I do one of these with you, I'm like, everything that comes out of your mouth, I'm like, yes, that. It's like, I feel like it's like, well, Sangu's already answered my question.
We should just do a crossover.
Like, we should. Yeah. That'd be great. I would love that.
And then you can co-write steamy scenes together.
No, oh God, no. I, and because all I can hear is my mom. All I can hear is my mom in the background going, oh dear. Oh, I know she reads them. Anyway, that's fine. I just have to, thank God my teenage children are not even remotely interested in reading a single word I write. So there is that blessing. I wish they read more, but I don't know. I think as I'm writing for the adult sphere, well, no, and actually for young adult too, I think family has always played a really big part of it because I already had kids by the time it occurred to me to start writing. I started writing really late in the game, and it's just such a huge part of your life, and it does just fill you with doubt. Like you love them so much and you want so badly to do right by them. And there's just always something in the back of my mind going, are they going to be sitting in a therapist chair someday, unpacking all the ways I jacked them up? I hope not. I at least had good intent and I love the hell out of them. And that's always kind of in the back of my mind. And so as I'm writing books, even though they are frequently centered on love stories, and I don't think most of them are actually what you'd call romances, except for Heart and Mercy, but like, even though it centers a love story, that the kind of familial relationships in the books, whether it's found family or your actual family, are like really integral to the whole book. And especially the relationship between parents and children. I loved writing The Undermining of Twyla and Frank because it's about a woman in her 50s with grown kids who has been there, done that through all of it, and is now watching her daughter, take the plunge and is about to get married, and the complications of what that kind of brings out in her own memory of being married and being a mother. And it's complicated and it's messy and it's kind of it covers what happens after the happily ever after, right? Like Twyla's already experienced that. And I don't know, I find it compelling and interesting and think those are fun relationships to explore that also like really bring depth to the characters, I think.
I also loved the letters in Undercutting of Rosie and Adam. I know letters are like a thing that you've, used in the other books as well, but it was really fun to see. I mean, fun and like emotionally kind of difficult and heart-wrenching, but fun to see the letters back in Undercutting of Rosie and Adam.
Yeah, I think Heart and Mercy and Rosie and Adam are kind of like bookends, of that series, that they really kind of reflect each other, and they're like two ends of the spectrum where Heart's concern is if he worries, he doesn't know whether or not he's immortal. And like, that's like something that weighs on him for that whole book. And Rosie knows from the get-go that she is, and it's a really different kind of struggle. So it kind of made sense to bring the letters back, but in a really different capacity in that book. And also I just like writing the little animal mail carriers in this series. So it was kind of fun to figure out who that was going to be. Little bonus for me.
I want to now also talk about Exquisite Ruin. I want to know two things. I want to know many things, but the two that I'm gonna ask about now is I wanted to know about how you approach the idea of the Greek mythology elements and kind of what you wanted to take, what you wanted to leave behind, what you wanted to change, and specifically one of my favorite elements, and that I'd also like to know a little bit more about, is how you balanced memories and timelines. I didn't know if this question was like too spoilery. I don't think it is, but I'm not answering it. So obviously, I think the question itself is pretty much okay.
Yeah. For the Greek elements, I really picked and chose a lot and left a lot out and changed a lot. I let the characters drive the story, and so it's not really. I mean, I fought against calling it a retelling of the Minotaur myth because it's not. it's inspired by it, but my publisher wanted to go with that, so they did. But yeah, I took a lot of the elements of the gods, but kind of boiled them down to their essence. And there was the maze, and Daesra is also like he's the male main character. He's kind of Theseus, the Minotaur, and Dionysus all in one. So I just rolled things together when I wanted to, and it was a really rich area to draw from. But I also just it's not a retelling, and I just took whatever I wanted. And the flashback scenes, balancing them, they were really challenging. I never have used flashbacks like that before in anything else, and they needed to come at precise moments that served the present plot, and it was challenging. I couldn't have written it without Scrivener. I had it mapped out and all the little note cards and figuring out where everything fit. It was a puzzle, but a fun one.
Yeah, because I think what one of the things that I really loved in Exquisite Ruin, but also in general with like the flashbacks, is how you maintain the tension, right? You have this main mystery, and I feel like sometimes mysteries can get old if the tension isn't sustained.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm kind of asking about the timelines and kind of wondering if whether in in editing or whatever, or also in drafting, you ever felt like, okay, I need to put some sort of red herring or some sort of breadcrumb here to maintain this. And so, okay, now we're going to go into the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah, exactly. And because not only do you have to keep the present interesting, but also flashbacks can get old. A lot of people, they irritate a lot of people because they break up the narrative. So they really had to serve the narrative and drive it along and be like, oh, we get another clue here. And yeah, it was fun to really figure that out. And hopefully it worked.
Yeah, I was reading Exquisite Ruin on vacation, and it was funny because I was telling everyone the plot of the books that I was reading on vacation with my family, and I remember distinctly finishing it and being like, "Okay, I have to tell everybody the twist," which made it like difficult to explain because I feel like you get into this position where when you read a book, I don't know about you all, when you read a book and you're telling someone about it, you're like so excited and you're like, oh my God, they're gonna get it. Like they're gonna have so much fun. And you just see this blank look on people's faces because they haven't read it and they have no emotional connection. And they're like, okay, cool. And then I think that that was kind of this overexcited like version of myself and these people who are like, what is the Minotaur doing? Like, why are you telling us this story? But yeah, I had to share that. That was
It's a
fun.
weird one.
Um,
Oh,
Jamie,
thank you. Yeah.
Jamie, I want to ask. You mentioned it a little bit before. I loved how in Homegrown Magic, you're both you and Becca are able to balance like this cozy plant vibes and also kind of like anti-capitalist power is really hard. How do we balance the ethics of that? So that's what I'd love to ask you about. How you both manage to balance kind of these conversations about power and ethics and magic and maybe also legacy with also kind of whimsical fashion and and plant magic, and like how do you sort of figure that out?
I mean, I don't know. I'd love to tell you that it's all perfectly detailed and planned from the beginning, but even like I woke up to a message that Becca sent me at 3 in the morning, Becca's time, about like a plot point for Act 4 for the next book that we're working on. We are a bit chaotic and things do evolve a bit organically. But with that said, we both bring strengths to the table, I think. And Becca's strengths tend to be like very, very strong at research and detail orientation. And like, I feel like I bring vibes to the party. So often, like, if we need to get a scene that gets us moving in terms of like plot and character, like that's me. Or I kick off the steamy scenes, and then Becca is the one who's building us this deep lore and this deep world building and things like that. And somehow in that, like just based on who we are and how what we believe in personally and things like that, I think that's where some of the conversations either about ethics or anti-capitalism or some of these other things that you will see emerging even more so in like book 2 and in other parts of this series if we get it. Yeah, I think some of that rose organically from who we are and who we were thinking about, like as we were thinking about being in these situations and in these systems of power. And so, like, the worlds are juxtaposed. Like, there's the city and the, mechanisms of power that Yale's part of, and then there's Bloomfield with Margot, and like this suggestion and this argument that community is actually a better way to live and that we can nurture and support each other. I mean, I think that's like the primary argument of the book, and then there's this like cute little romance along the way. But that's what we wanted to say with it. So I just think that those are things that we believe, and that we live, and that it made its way into a book about gardening and growing just kind of happened organically. But some of the details, so like the fashion show, for example, this is so silly. I love fashion. Like I mean, I work from home, so I tend to live in like t-shirts and stuff, but I love fashion. And I love, like watching shows about extensive real estate or fashion competitions. And I think I was watching, like, as I was moving into the part of Homegrown Magic where I needed something to happen that got Margot like in the eye of the people from the city. I think I was watching Old Project Runway with my daughter, and they were doing one of those challenges where they go to like a florist shop and they make their gowns out of flowers. I mean, it's just one of these like weird moments. You know how this goes in life, where you're like, I've got this story problem, and you're working it, and then something in the world just kind of hits you over the head, and you're like, there it is, I solved it, great. So that's why there is a floral based fashion show in Homegrown Magic, because I knew I needed this thing that would draw people to them. So it's not that like our characters are deeply invested in fashion, but it just was a handy device for us to blend these worlds. I mean, I think fashion's ridiculous, and I think the world of like high-end luxury real estate or luxury clothing is ridiculous, but I also think it's very interesting to put into a fantasy world and think about how we would deal with it there. I don't know if that's as articulate as it sounded in my head, but yeah, there's a lot of organic, like, oh, that just happened, or oh, yeah, I could go on and on about weird things in book two. There's a cabin in book two that I know I needed to get my characters to a cabin where steamy things would happen, and I needed to feed them, and that's all I knew going into this. And so now we have this like, hope I'm not spoiling anything too much. We have this like magical cabin that responds to like the more they kiss, it makes them soup, or it like lights candles and things like that. So I started out with here's the problem. I wasn't quite sure where we'd end up. So I think that there's a bit of that in the world building. Becca would be like, no, it is absolutely deliberate and well researched. And here's what I learned about I don't know, flags in the world of 15th century France, and here's how I brought it into the book. But that's
I love how it's like, how can we get these people here? Fashion show. This is, of course, the way that people will come visit us. It's like if they have, like, if they can see a runway, this will get everybody here.
but yeah.
I do have like a nitty gritty question about the co-writing process, because you said that Becca really enjoys like as you said, like the researching elements and like the world and building that up and like researching that. When the co-writing process, if you're writing, like a vibe scene or you're writing a scene that has more of that, does Becca come in and be like, okay, you need like some, world, or like how do you approach that kind of situation?
Sure. So Becca is an agent in a fairly editorial one. So I think sometimes like we're both doing a read through of the first like 300 pages right now. And, I'm noting questions, and then Becca's like got an ongoing like Discord thread of like, here's everything we need to do in revision. And I'm just like, oh, great, let's throw this in. It's very complimentary though. And so we each have a character in the books. We each write our character, which I think helps distinguish the character voices a little bit in interesting ways. But so it will be more, and I tend to be an underwriter in my first drafts, whereas Becca is more, I wouldn't say an overwriter, but is a more like thorough writer. So I write really fast, and then I go back in and I add stuff in, and Becca does the opposite. Yeah, so sometimes like she'll go through and lore drop or add a little bit, but we don't tend to add too much to each other's chapters. We tend to talk it out, and then the other one goes back in and like beefs it out a little bit more. Like we were talking about flashbacks, like just last night when we were texting, I realized, oh my gosh, my character in book 2 needs like at least 3 more flashbacks with her mother throughout the book, so that when her mother shows up in chapter 27, my readers know who she is and why it's going to resonate. And so I realized I need to go back and do that. But there is just the co-writing process is a lot of back and forth, but with an eye towards each of our characters. I have another pal, Rosie Thor, who just The Dead and Breakfast is coming out. It's a vampire murder mystery. It's great. But Rosie and their co-writer, they do it totally differently. Like their co-writer like writes the fast draft with no descriptions or anything like that. And then Rosie goes back in and like beefs out every chapter basically. So they're not trading off. They're like each doing different, like one of them likes to do drafting. The other one likes to do revision and expansion. Which works beautifully for them in the case of that book. But I think I always wondered, Megan, you mentioned Christina Lauren. I wonder how they write. Like I've been thinking about that for years and I have no idea, but I think it's very interesting to consider.
I want to ask now, we've talked a bit about romance, we talked about adult projects, other projects, YA projects, middle grade projects. I want to know from you all if you feel that writing these adult projects has sort of influenced, impacted not only your writing of other YA or middle grade projects, but also your craft in general, whether it be the evolution of writing, you're writing throughout, or like lessons that you will have learned throughout the way. Adrienne, do you want to start? Because you were also chatting about your YA.
Yeah. Let me think. I definitely learned a lot from this book, and really kind of the dual timeline was a big challenge for me to figure out, and bringing kind of the complexity of, even though it's the same POV, it really helped stretch me as a writer there. But otherwise, yeah, other than a more complex plot, I mean, I don't write down in my YA or anything like that. I mean, obviously they're dealing with different themes, coming of age themes versus like more adult themes. But yeah, I think the technical aspect of Exquisite Ruin was definitely a great learning process, and hopefully I have some more tools from that.
So good. What about you in your middle grade? I know you were talking about going up and down at the same time. Were there things that you like learned from that?
I feel like, weirdly, I don't think my process is actually all that different based on age group. I mean, yes, I do have to stop myself and remind myself not to swear in the middle grade books, and that happens quite a lot. But I mean, other than that, I think when I'm working on them at roughly the same time, like if I'm drafting one and editing another, that can get really tricky because you've got first person in one and it's, a child, and in the other it's third person with more whimsy, and it can be hard sometimes, and I will find myself the voice drifting sometimes. But other than that, I don't think the process really changes. So what I've found more than anything is that it doesn't matter what kind of book I'm writing, each one I think makes me better. I feel like each one has been a building block to the next one in some way. And sometimes it's as subtle as, I wrote a book, and therefore, because I put some hours into a craft, I'm now better at it. And sometimes it's more obvious, where a thread that kind of gets teased in one book is something I pull at more in a different book, and I want to kind of explore that more. And I don't realize I want to until I've written that. And they might be completely different books, completely different age groups. But it's like in the writing of one, I realize that there's something I want to work on in the next one. And that, I mean, I think with themes and with tropes and motifs, that happens quite a lot. And I really enjoy that. Like, I love that part of the process. It's like a surprise every time.
Megan?
Yeah, I think I don't think I will be writing YA again. I loved writing YA, but I don't know. I think what I like to write in YA doesn't, and this is not saying, oh, YA is terrible or anything. It's just more that I think what I tend to write doesn't fit very well with the market at the moment. There's great books being written in that market. I'm just not sure that that's necessarily where my strengths are. And I've also I hate to say it, but I've been more successful writing for adults than for the young adult market. So I think I'm going to hang here for a while. Although I'm also really interested in writing middle grade. So it's kind of the same thing, that spread. And I think that's partially because I have teenagers. And so you would think I would be more interested in writing for them, but I live and breathe teenagers right now, and it's kind of maybe not what I want to do when I'm working. So I am kind of interested in the same split that Sangu's doing. And I also have a theory as a former children's librarian that the younger the audience you're writing for, the more challenging that work is. I think a lot of people think, oh, like writing a picture book, very easy because it's so short, but it's actually incredibly challenging to hit the mark on a good children's picture book. And it's not something that everybody can do. Like there's a whole skill set that goes into that is very specific. And I have tried, and I did story time for a million years, and I have yet to get a children's picture book manuscript through the process because it's just really hard to hit that mark. So I do have the theory that I think people think, well, if you're writing for adults, you're kind of leveling up, but I don't think that's the case. I think the younger your audience, the more you really have to know about, the maturity level or kind of just where people are in terms of childhood development, the sorts of things that interest your audience and are going to appeal to your audience. You're not writing for adults when you're writing for children, but sometimes you have to do the line of writing for both children and the adults who are reading with them and trying to figure out how to please both. I don't know. I just think there's a whole skill set that goes into writing younger that bolsters your skill set if you're writing for adults. Like I think writing for children maybe can really help you write better for adults too. So I think no matter what, it's like Sangu said, no matter what, writing kind of begets writing. And it doesn't matter what you're writing. Each time you set out to write a book, your skill set is building and you're adding on to what your capacity is, if that makes sense.
Just to jump back in on that, like you said earlier about how you feel like you're going to stay in the space because you've had more success in it. I mean, I think that's a thing that we're not supposed to talk about, our livelihoods and money and, the boring business side of writing, but it matters. Sadly, we are adults who live in a capitalist world. We need to exist. We need to be paid. And so it might not seem like the most kind of creative experience, but at the end of the day, it makes sense for all of us, I think. And I think it's a decision a lot of writers make, is that where you find success, you do more of that.
Right, because there's no guarantee.
Exactly.
That, I can write a young adult book, but I don't know that would get through. I don't know that I would be published again in young adult.
I don't know
that someone would buy that book. So there is that part of the kind of mathematical equation of figuring out, like, I have lots of things that I would like to write, but there's a matter of, I do have to kind of consider what might possibly maybe sell.
That was definitely a discussion. I was kind of curious about the rest of you too, if market factors were a part of your decision of moving to adult, because it definitely was for me. I've always wanted to write adult fantasy, and in fact started writing young adult fantasy, or adult fantasy, ages ago. And then my agent at the time was like, young adult is really where it's happening right now, so you should write young adult. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know much about young adult. So I went and read a million young adult books, and that was 10 years ago now. And so this decision to go to adult was actually, a conversation with my agent, who is more adult fantasy oriented. And she was like, I think this would be smart for you to do right now, as far as where the market is going. Young adult is more difficult right now. And so, the market was definitely a factor, but luckily that's also what I wanted to do.
Jamie, do you want to, you were also talking about a YA project earlier too.
Yeah. I'll just wrap up and say, I get all of those. I have a day job. Like I have a full-time day job. So like writing is a different like financial imperative for me than I think many of the people I know who are full-time writers, which also, means sometimes my time is balanced differently. But it does, I feel like it does allow me to chase the weirder ideas that may or may not sell. But that said, like I have a book of my heart out on submission right now, and golly, editors are loving it, but nobody's bought it. I get a lot of those like, oh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Sorry. So like, I don't know how to.
But it's amazing how often that happens. It's like all the editors will say yes, and then it goes up to acquisitions, and the money people are all like, no.
Yeah, I mean, I had my first book that my first agent signed me for back out of Pitch Wars 2015. this little middle grade project that went to acquisitions like 4 or 5 times, and we did not get a yes. And I think, I thought that was going to be the book that like that was my Percy Jackson kind of book. I thought that was going to be it. And to date, like I've not had that level of commercial success. So I will be interested to see what happens in the adult space. The projects I have contracted, like I'm working the YA project I have due is with this editor I've worked with on 5 books, and like I love them. I love it's I don't know. I don't know what my expectations for that are, nor do I know what my expectations for the next bit of my career are. I do know that like I have a pretty deep bench of like adult projects that I want to work on, like solo projects. So I'm hoping to chase those like over this summer. My agent has heard about all of them to the point that she's like, just give me the books. I'm like, well, they're not done yet because of all these other things. So I know where I'm going next. I don't know if there'll be any success. But to what you all said, I do get better with every book, but I'm also like in this adult book, I feel like it's, I don't want to say easier, but I've relaxed. Like I have a background in like literature and like graduate level, like literature degrees. And I was very serious for a very long time as a writer. And now I'm like, yeah, so they walked into the forest. And I mean, like it's the prose has almost gotten a little bit more effortless, even though there's still like thought and skill behind it. So I've given myself permission to like just write something fun. I don't know. It's hard to say. Then again, I just read a bunch of books by H.G. Perry that make me like aspire to do like these incredible, dense, like brilliant historical fantasies. And like, oh, I could go on and on. But like that makes me want to be better. And so I have always a lot of books like that too, that I want to strive for. So I don't know. I guess I'm always learning. I will never ever try and do this to myself again, but like all of you, I have one book going in third person present. I have one book going in like third person past right now, and then a work in progress that's first person present, I think. And so when I jump between these 3, it just like my brain is scrambled, and I always end up writing in the wrong tense for at least like half a page, and then I have to go back and fix it. And so that, when we're talking about genre hopping, I find the like nuts and bolts of it much more challenging than like even the financial forecast or anything like that.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us all today. This, as I said before, and I will say that after this experience, it is definitely still the bright spot of my April. I have left everyone's bookshop or links down below, so please go check out the recently released Exquisite Rune and Homegrown Magic and the pre-order availability or pre-order possibility. I'd lock them in while you can right now for the undercutting of Rosie and Adam and a magical. Oh my god! I literally when I was writing Sangha, when I was writing your title, I was like, do I know how to spell innkeeping? I keep putting this R in, and and every time it was like innkeepering.
I can't even do the whole titles anymore. I just do irregular witches, magical innkeeping. That's it.
Yeah. So Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, not innkeepering. And I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. And yeah, thank you all to everyone who watched. Thank you to the authors for joining me and humoring my questions. And yes, everyone have a really great rest of your day wherever you are. Bye, everybody.